Hi, I'm Beatrice Go and welcome to Sports Wrap. Philippines ended its Tokyo Olympics campaign with a silver thanks to Carlo Paalam. It was a match that we were all waiting for this weekend, so here's a recap, and we have a special guest later to talk about the bout and Philippine boxing's run in the Tokyo Olympics. Carlo Paalam's Tokyo 2020 Olympics journey ended with a silver after falling to Great Britain's Galal Yafai via a 4-1 split decision in the boxing tournament's men's flyweight final on Saturday, August 7 at the Kokugikan Arena. Paalam landed early shots in the opening round but went down and was given a standing 8 count. The Filipino recovered immediately, but Yafai continued his relentless pace to win the favor of all five judges in the first round. Paalam brought out his discipline in the second round, and although he found his range, he still trailed the British heading into the final round. In the third round, Yafai kept his distance, but Paalam continued to push. Despite Paalam's efforts before the final bell sounded, it just wasn't enough for the gold as Yafai was announced the winner. Before Paalam's gold medal bout, only Nessie Petesio and Onyok Velasco have notched Philippine boxing's highest finishes with silver medals. Now, Paalam, who is the youngest in the Philippine boxing team at 23 years old, propelled the Philippines in the Tokyo Olympics medal tally. Together with weightlifter Heidelin Diaz, who won our first gold medal, Petesio, and boxing men's middleweight bronze medalist Ymir Marshall. So that was a short recap of what went on Philippine boxing's events today. And now we move on to welcome back Raptors' former sports editor and boxing analyst who writes for The Ring TV, Ryan Songalia.
Hey,
Hey,
yeah,
Ryan.
I feel
Woo!
so. You call me a special guest again. It's like my third time here. I feel super special.
Exactly, Ryan. So nice to have you back and good early morning there in the US. Thanks for coming over again.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so Ryan, like I know that you have a lot of thoughts again about after watching Carlos fight with Galal Yafai. So take it away.
Well, first things first. Galal Yafai needs to be congratulated for an excellent fight. He came in with a great game plan. He knew that Paalam likes to get his space and to box and counterpunch. He didn't give Paalam the space that he needed to operate and be comfortable. He jumped him from the opening bell, and yeah, and Paalam did as best as he could to catch up early on. When he went to the ropes, I think that Paalam thought he had enough distance to get away from that straight left hand, but that straight left hand, which was thrown as a 1-2, almost like a Manny Pacquiao 1-2, knocked Paalam to the ground. But you have to give him a lot of credit. You know, the Philippines really should be proud of what Carlo Paalam accomplished tonight. He came in as very much overlooked. He was not someone who had qualified through like the Asia qualifier. He was someone who got in because of his rankings, and they had, the IOC had canceled some of the boxing qualifiers, so they needed to fill the numbers. Paalam's previous highest achievement was a bronze medal at the 2018 Asian Games, which that does not, as talented and difficult as the Asian Games are, that does not usually inspire gold medal talk. So, going into this, and even Yafai was not really considered, a favorite, even though he comes from a boxing family. His older brother Cal Yafai was a 2008 Olympian and a former WBA junior bantamweight title holder in the professionals, and his other brother Gamal Yafai was a former European champion in the pros. But Yafai was also not considered a gold medal favorite. But Yafai had beaten the 2017 world champion from Cuba in the quarterfinals, and Paalam beat the reigning gold medal in the quarterfinals, which kind of really upset everyone's bracket. We're talking about, bracket busting right there in the quarters. You had a completely new tournament. I think if you took these two fighters and mixed them up against all of the 32 who were in the Olympics, you would and you bracketed them away from each other. You would still get these two guys in the finals. These were the two best fighters in the flyweight division. So Palam's 23 years old, as you'd mentioned. He's the youngest boxer on the team, and because of the way that things have changed now with how we look at professionals, professionals are now allowed to compete in boxing international tournaments. We could see Paalam in 2024 in Paris. He would be, I think, 26 years old by then, and still a young fighter. But he could start his pro career and get going, and then, get almost like how in the PBA we call people up for the national team, or hey, Carlo, your country needs you at the World Championships, or the Asian Games. I think that you can still take this core, which has great chemistry with the local coaches, and also the international coach, Don Abnett from Australia, who really did a great job for putting together a squad that could not just compete at the Olympics but win medals. So a lot to feel good about for Philippine boxing going forward, and hopefully this is the start of many great things for years to come.
Nice. Well said, Ryan. And actually, you did mention that Carlo did not directly qualify for the Olympics. He qualified by virtue of ranking. So his last big international bout before the Olympics was actually the Asian and Oceania qualifiers and the Sea Games. How different was that Carlo in the Sea Games and Asian Oceania qualifiers to the Carlo Paalam that you see now in the Olympics?
I remember seeing Carlo, as part of the national team years ago when he was a child when I first met him, and people were telling me back then this guy is going to be the real deal. And to think about to make it to the national team as a flyweight is by itself a big accomplishment, because that's a very competitive division. Like, to be a middleweight, it's amazing that your Mir Marshall has gotten this far, in the international stage. But there's no competition for him in the Philippines. In at flyweight, there's 100 or so guys who could fill that spot, and Carlo was the best guy that we had. So I remember seeing him at the Asian Games. I'm sorry, at the Sea Games. He looked good. It was nice. That's not the best competition in the world, in Southeast Asia, for boxing, because really honestly, it's just, Philippines and Thailand, and then whatever, the host country, however the scoring goes there. But, you're not going to get the best competition there. But when he competed at the 2018 Asian Games and he earned a bronze, I was like, whoa, because he looked really good. Now, and I knew that I felt that he was maturing at the right time. When you're a boxer, you get the continental qualifier, which Carlo fell short in, but then you get a last chance world qualifier. And so Carlo didn't get his chance to get, his second chance at, qualifying. He may have gotten it, because he really was, I think, maybe the best guy, outside of the people who made it to Asia. So, but I knew that time was the best friend of Carlo Paalam. And this extra year, I think, to sort of mature did wonders for him. And I think that he's only going to get better from here, because you got to remember, he's 23 years old. When Manny Pacquiao, and obviously I'm talking about amateurs and pros, different things, but when Manny Pacquiao was younger, he was not the finished product. He had to mature. He had to get knocked down and come back. And I think Carlo Paalam's at that point right now. Carlo's at that moment where his heart was tested. When you get knocked down like that, 90 seconds into the gold medal match, and you're on the floor and you're like, what happened? Why am I here? What am I doing here? The whole world's watching and I'm on the floor. And then you get up and you brush yourself off and you fight as hard as he did. That's character building. And we're talking about a young man, 23 years old, who still has a couple years to go before he's in his prime. You know, that moment where his experience and youth meet at the perfect moment. He's not there yet, and I if he's going to stick around on the national team, you know, regardless if he goes pro, I'm curious to see what he does because he, I wouldn't be surprised in 3 years he's in the gold medal match again, and we're waiting with bated breath, just as we did, you know, tonight.
Yeah, and it's amazing because, like you said, time is the best friend of Carlo, and in the next 3 years, it's actually going to be really packed for the Philippines with the Sea Games, Asian Games, and the Olympics is not 4 years away, but 3 years away this time. So, really amazing for our boxers. And Ryan, you also mentioned that like you've been covering boxing all your life, and you've also encountered Galal and his brothers. Can you talk about like where they actually also came from to just give a perspective on who Carlos' opponent was, and he's the gold medalist.
Yeah, no. So this is a boxing family. This is a family that, you know, their destiny from, you know, a young age was to be fighters. So Khalid Yafai, the oldest brother, he was the WBA junior bantamweight champion for a while. In fact, I got to cover one of his fights in Fresno when Jerwin Oncajas and him shared a bill on a top rank card. Cal Yafai in 2008, I think he lost in the round of 16. He lost to the Cuban fighter, and you know, when you talk about amateur boxing, you know, Cubans are, you know, that's the powerhouse. Like how your medal chances are greatly increased or affected by how close you are to getting in there with the Cuban. So he lost in the round of 16 there, and his other brother Gamal was the European champion. I think at, I want to say, 122 pounds. A very talented fighter himself on the European level. So this was, you know, this was basically Galal finishing what his brother had started, and you know that's, you know, Great Britain has a very rich boxing history. I mean, that's where boxing came from. So, you know, we talk about Marcus of Queensberry rules. That's boxing, and you know, to the extent that I understand, you know, Marcus of Queensberry is from England. But so the Philippines had done very well in the past, you know, against British boxers in the professionals. The first ever Philippine or even Asian champion, world champion in the pros, um, Pancho Villa, he beat the great Jimmy Wild in 1923 to win the world's flyweight championship in New York, and then, you know, of course, Manny Pacquiao and what he did to Ricky Hatton in 2 rounds. But that wasn't the case tonight. You know, tonight it was Galal Yafai's time. You know, he's 28 years old, I believe. So he was, you know, that's when we're talking about experience and youth meeting at the right spot. So it was Galal Yafai's night.
Yeah, and it was also Great Britain's first amateur boxing gold, according to the headlines as well. So,
Oh,
is it?
in this tournament, in this year, in 2008,
Yes.
Nicola Adams won the women's flyweight gold.
Yeah,
Uh,
so in the Tokyo Olympics, like at least Great Britain, where boxing originated, kind of went home with the medal at least. Like that's what happened.
Yeah, yeah, and they actually did better this time around than they did in 2016. I mean, Nicola Adams, you know, who's, you know, a, you know, kind of a national hero in Great Britain. She won the women's flyweight, but they only won 3 medals in 2016. I believe they got a gold, 2 silvers, and 2 bronzes, and then they have another gold medal match tomorrow in the women's middleweight final against China. So they've had a pretty good year themselves. You know, if you're looking at scale, because, you know, Great Britain is, you know, always, you know, going to be there in the conversation for, you know, top boxing countries. The Philippines had a great year with 3 of their 4, you know, boxers getting medals, but it's a pretty good year for Great Britain as well.
That's true. Like it's really just a great year for us, honestly. Like that's 3 out of 4, really good. And I could just imagine, like speaking from a reporter's perspective, like a lot we wouldn't actually be going this far usually in every Olympic Games, but then this year we're all the way till the end of the Olympic campaign. So well, regards to Philippine boxing, I'm sure it was like a big jump from the 2016 Rio Olympics. Ryan, for you, what did they do right in this preparation for the Olympics?
You talking about the boxing team? Or
Yes, Philippine boxing, the team and like the federation.
Well, first off, I want to give credit to ABAP, Ed Pixon, whom I had spoken with. He's the executive director of ABAP, which oversees amateur boxing in the Philippines. He did a great job, and this was something that had been in the works for many years. And we're talking about uh, 2016 was a rough year because the Philippines had sent very few people, athletes in general, but the two boxers that the Philippines had sent, Charlie Suarez, I think, had sort of missed his moment. He was a little bit past his best by that time that he got hit the call, and then Rojan Ladon just didn't have a style that could do well. I think at the international level. So they both did well in their first fights. Sort of fighting their best, but it was not to be. And then you look back to 2012 now. And it was Mark Anthony Barriga was the only boxer that the Philippines had sent, which was kind of a disappointment where a lot of people were looking forward to seeing him excel, but it just wasn't to be. Again, a small fighter, guy didn't have a lot of power, but was he overachieved for what he was physically. He had beaten, at the qualifier, he had beaten the reigning bronze medalist. So, he was someone that people were excited about, but just didn't have a realistic shot. When you talk about this team, you're looking at Nesty Petesio, who had been on the national team since 2007. You're talking about Carlo Paalam, the guy who had been, he's still a kid in a lot of ways, but had been a very young fighter. I think he was, I want to say like 16 or 15 years old when, he was one of the discoveries of Cagayan de Oro City Mayor Oscar Moreno, and he's like one of the guys who really works with the national team to funnel a lot of these talented boxers, to the national team. So he'd been around for a long time. And then Ymir Marshall, in 2011, he was, the world youth champion, I think flyweight. So he's been a top amateur for about 10 years now. And then, of course, Irish Magno is someone who'd been a real pioneer as well for the women's boxing team. So these are people who've been works in progress for a long time, getting their moment and making the most of it. So what I think has gone well. Number one is that ABAP had staged a lot of these international training camps. I think for this one, 3 of their 4 boxers trained in Thailand, where Nesty was able to spar with I think it was the lightweight from Thailand, who did very well at the Olympics. And then also you have the international coach, that they had brought on, Don Abnett. He's been around since 2019. No, actually, he had been coming and going, for years from the Philippines, but he'd taken over as the head coach in 2019. And he has been working well with the local coaches, the people who have been, sort of the, the heads of the boxing program for a number of years. They were able to put their egos aside and do what's right for the betterment of the fighters, and that's not always easy. When you're talking about like someone coming in, who's not from that country, and you kind of have to swallow your pride and say, listen, this may not be the best for me in terms of like me shining, but the overall mission really is that we bring home medals. So. It was a ride or die thing with the coach Don Abnett, and the Philippines did better for that. What I hope now happens is what this solidifies for me as someone who's been covering Philippine sports for a long time. I was a sports editor, and for Rappler, and I had to understand more about basketball culture. Even though I grew up as a big basketball fan, but obviously, I was a boxing guy and baseball, and there's no baseball in the Philippines, so I had to learn all these different sports. And I while there may be some sports that are more glamorous, that get a little bit more attention because there's a collegiate tie-in and there's a lot of pride for that. Um, the three medals that the Philippines is bringing back from Tokyo solidifies what I've always believed, that the Philippines is a boxing country. And what I mean by that is, if you look, I think 14 medals in total that Olympic medals that the Philippines has earned at the Olympics. Um, 8 of them are boxing, and that's dating back to, I want to say, 1932. So for a long time, boxing has been the go-to sport for international success, and I hope that this sort of lights a fire under legislators to say, hey, if we want to start, like, if we want to continue this, we need to start funding or increase funding for grassroots boxing. Um, we need to be able to, to find these talents, get them where they need to be, and nurture them, because there is, the Philippines does have a deep bench of boxers that they can run out there and have, like, compete at the world stage. But if you get the most talented person, but they're worried about their stipend not being paid, and they're not in the right mental state. I'm not saying that that's happening now, but that's something that happened. Other boxers had mentioned, like, long time ago, that was an issue. If boxers aren't getting the exposure that they need, because it's really like, we should not be surprised that we're doing so well at the Olympics in boxing, because this was a really good team. These are good fighters. People deserve to know who they are. And I think that, of course, Philippine media has done a great job, because this is the Olympics. And this is sports writers. This is what we wait for 4 years, or in this case, 5 years. This is almost like the Olympics for sports writers too. It's like, okay, well, we're going to get the most reads now. We better go out there and put our best content. So I think the sports writers have done, a great job, especially Rappler Sports. And I'm a little bit biased because I'm always a big fan of Rappler Sports. But I'm talking about television. I would love to see, like, for instance, the Philippine national games, which shows the where the national boxing championships take place, and where we really see, like, people solidify their spot on the national team. I would like to see those televised. I would like to see those covered, the way that we cover something like the UAP. It draws a lot of attention. Maybe we're going to find the next Carla Paola. Maybe we're going to find the next Yumir Marshall or Nesty Petesio. And I think that, it would be great, for the boxers' morale, and also just for the state of, boxing, because there's almost no, like, in terms of, like, grassroots development, not even grassroots development. I remember when we covered, we have, if you want to watch German Ancajas winning his world championship fight, you have to go to Rappler's YouTube page, because no TV picked it up. You know what I mean? It was me and, Marga Diona were there covering the fight, basically on, like, we had a live stream on Facebook, from a phone that Marga was holding. And then I happened to, I had, like, a microphone that we put together the video early morning at, like, at a pizza place. So yeah, that's, we need to see the best, coverage of these boxers, because we need to see we need to see these athletes get their due, because it will encourage other athletes to want to get into this and see that, first off, there's money to be made. You don't have to just worry about, going pro. You win an Olympic medal, you're forever, you're forever a celebrity. You're forever a hero. So what these 3 boxers, and really 4 boxers, Irish Magno included, what they accomplished at the Olympics deserves to be remembered forever.
That's true. They are solidified in history. And Yes, that's true. Like Philippines winning medals not only in popular sports like basketball and volleyball, but then also in other sports, as we've seen, like Haden Diaz in weightlifting. So hopefully the support will not just be for the top earning sports, but also for these sports that we have covered all of throughout the years, even with Rappler. Like I wasn't still part of Rappler, but then you guys were covering the Palarong Pambansa since 2013. Yeah.
Yeah, in fact, I remember at Palarong Pamansa, like seeing the Lorente brothers, and one I think it's I forget which one of them is a top prospect right now. I remember seeing him as like a teenager. Like I'm like this guy's gonna be something good, and he competed for the national team at the world champion, not the world championship, I think the youth championships. Um, there's so many talents to be discovered, uh, and that was another thing. Palarong Pamansa, I think that was 2014. I want to say up in I forget which province. But I remember very few there were very few sports writers there. It was at night covering the boxing competition. It was me and the other people who are like more inclined to like follow boxing. We were the only people there, like. But you go to like the basketball games and you have like, massive crowds, for like quarterfinals, like NCR versus like the Cebu team or something like that. So it's like it's really it's really about like us just finding finding these diamonds in the rough, and just nurturing them because when you go to the national team, it's not just okay. You have a chance to compete at the Olympics. Your whole life changes. You're getting a monthly stipend. You can go to they have a training camp up in Baguio. You can get you're going to get an education at Baguio City High. If you want to go to University of Baguio and get a degree, you have a scholarship. I think Nesty Petestio graduated already with a scholarship. I think Josie Gabuco as well. The 5-time, might as well be 100-time SEA Games gold medalist because no one's gonna ever beat her until she decides she doesn't want to fight anymore. But like there are so many opportunities, and I think that if it becomes a more glamorous opportunity for people, and people understand, okay, listen, you train hard, you've trained smart, you can have this opportunity to make it to the Olympics or to make it to the World Championships, which is a big tournament, um, or you go to SEA Games, you can tee off on some like Vietnamese boxer who was at like 3 fights or something like that and win a gold medal. Even though I always said SEA Games boxing it's like kind of like a if you're talking about like development and finding out who's the best in the world, like it's not really like kind of a pointless tournament. But the boxers, actually I remember writing a story for Rappler which said SEA Games boxing is pointless, but they like it anyways, right? Because it's like you're gonna get like assured medals, like so it's like Philippine. It's almost like how like Philippines does it like the SEA Games basketball, but you're punching people instead. So yeah, that's what I think about the Philippine boxing's development, and if we can sort of find ways to put them on television and to get them in these all these big tournaments, get them international experience, get them international training camps, and really sort of like get the best development for them. We're gonna be mining medals for a long time.
Right. Thank you so much, Ryan, for joining us again. Thank you for sharing your experiences covering Philippine boxing and the whole boxing world for the longest time. Thank you for joining us again, all the way from US.
Thanks for having me, B, and congratulations on excellent coverage. Rappler Sports has really killed it as always, and you guys have a lot to be proud of.
All right. So, speaking of our coverage, so Tokyo Olympics is wrapping up this week, and we have a lot more to talk about, like our golfers Yuka Saso and Bianca Pagdanganan, who also finished their fourth and final round in the women's golf tournament. Don't miss out our stories on Rappler Sports and stay tuned for our evening wrap later. Again, this is Beatrice Go, Rappler Manila.